The last thing my father ever said to me was, "You're a stain on this family name. From this moment forward, you are dead to us." He said it while holding a crystal champagne glass in one hand and a microphone in the other. And the worst part? He smiled when he said it. The ballroom inside the Sterling Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago went silent so fast I could hear the rain pounding against the windows 30 floors above Michigan Avenue. 300 guests froze mid-conversation. The orchestra stopped playing. Even the waiters carrying silver trays of champagne turned to stare at me. At first, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. Then the giant projection screens behind my father flickered to life. My blood turned cold. Bank statements appeared across the screens. Offshore transfers. Tax documents. Fraud investigations. Wire receipts. And every single one carried my name. Gasps spread across the ballroom. I remember gripping Mark's hand so tightly my nails dug into his skin. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't real." But my father kept talking. His voice was calm. Controlled. Almost rehearsed. "It breaks my heart," Arthur Sterling announced to the room, "to discover that my own daughter has spent years stealing from this company and laundering money through international accounts." The room exploded into whispers. People I had known my entire life stared at me like I was a criminal. One woman actually covered her mouth in disgust. Another guest pulled out his phone and started recording. I looked toward my mother. Evelyn Sterling sat at the front table in diamonds and ivory silk, staring silently into her champagne glass. She wouldn't even look at me. That was the moment I realized something horrifying. This wasn't spontaneous. They had planned this together. My father slowly turned toward me with cold gray eyes that had terrified me since childhood. "You embarrassed this family long enough," he said. "Now you'll carry the consequences alone." Then he nodded once toward security. Two men grabbed my arms. Mark lunged forward immediately. "Get your hands off her." But more guards stepped between us. I screamed for someone to stop this. Nobody moved. Not my mother. Not my brother. Not a single member of the Sterling family. They watched in silence as I was dragged across the marble ballroom floor in my ivory wedding gown while guests whispered and recorded my humiliation. The rain outside hit like ice. Security shoved me onto the curb beneath the glowing hotel sign while thunder cracked over the Chicago skyline. My veil landed in a puddle beside me. And through the giant glass windows above the entrance, I could still see my father standing beneath the chandeliers, calmly sipping champagne while my life burned to the ground. At least, that's what I believed then. I didn't know that Arthur Sterling had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because the daughter he threw away knew every secret buried inside the Sterling Empire. And before this was over, I was going to destroy him. To the public, the Sterlings were American royalty. Old money. Political connections. Luxury penthouses in Chicago, Aspen vacation homes, charity galas in Manhattan. Business magazines called my father the king of Midwest logistics. Arthur Sterling built Sterling Freight International into a billion-dollar shipping empire that stretched across the United States. Cargo ports. Trucking routes. Overseas warehouses. Politicians practically lined up to shake his hand. But inside our mansion in Lake Forest, Illinois, my father ruled like a dictator. Everything in that house revolved around appearance. At dinner, posture mattered more than feelings. Weakness was punished. Crying was humiliation. Love was conditional. My mother, Evelyn Sterling, had once been beautiful in the warm, effortless way old Hollywood actresses were beautiful. But decades with my father hollowed her out emotionally. By the time I was a teenager, she moved through the mansion like a ghost wrapped in designer clothing. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. Empty eyes. Then there was my older brother, Daniel. Daniel was the heir. The golden child. My father worshipped him because Daniel acted exactly like him, cold, ambitious, emotionally vacant. By 28, Daniel already ran part of Sterling Freight's financial division. He wore custom suits, collected luxury watches, and treated relationships like business transactions. The Sterling family didn't believe in affection. We believed in control. And for most of my life, I obeyed. I attended the private schools my father selected. Studied economics because he demanded it. Dated wealthy men from politically connected families. Every aspect of my existence was designed to strengthen the Sterling name. Then I met Mark Bennett. And everything changed. I met Mark on a rainy October afternoon in Chicago. Not at a gala. Not at a fundraiser. Not through business connections. I met him because I spilled coffee on him. I had ducked into a small bookstore cafe near Wicker Park trying to escape reporters after one of my father's charity events. I turned too quickly and dumped an entire latte onto a stranger's jacket. I panicked immediately. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Mark looked down at the stain, then laughed. Not fake laughter. Real laughed. It's okay, he said. Honestly, this jacket was terrible anyway. I remember staring at him because I wasn't used to men like him. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't nervous around the Sterling name. He didn't care who my father was. He taught history at a public high school on the south side of Chicago and spent weekends coaching debate students for free. And somehow, despite having none of the power or money my family valued, he made me feel safer than anyone ever had. For the first time in my life, I felt seen as a person instead of an asset. My father hated him instantly. "He's beneath you," Arthur Sterling said the first time he met Mark. We were standing inside my parents' dining room beneath a chandelier worth more than Mark's annual salary. Mark stayed calm. "With respect, sir," he replied, "your daughter isn't property to rank above or below people." My father's eyes darkened immediately. That was the moment he decided Mark would never truly become part of the family. And when I announced our engagement 6 months later, my father reacted with something far worse than anger. Relief. At the time, I didn't understand it. Now I do. Because by then, he already knew the federal government was beginning to investigate Sterling Freight International. And he had already chosen who would take the fall. Me. Looking back now, the wedding feels less like a celebration and more like an execution. Everything about it was extravagant. White roses imported from France. A 12-tier cake covered in edible gold. Celebrity guests. Politicians. Corporate executives. The ballroom overlooked Lake Michigan, glowing beneath thousands of hanging crystal lights. To outsiders, it looked magical. To me, it felt suffocating. My dress alone cost nearly $30,000. Layers of ivory silk wrapped around me so tightly I could barely breathe. But the strangest part wasn't the luxury. It was my father's behavior. He was too calm. Too pleasant. Almost cheerful. He hugged guests. Laughed during dinner. Toasted our future. At one point, I actually believed maybe he had accepted my marriage. I was so desperate for parental love that I ignored every warning sign. Then came the reception. The orchestra played softly while Mark and I prepared to cut the cake. My father stood suddenly. The room applauded automatically. Arthur Sterling always commanded attention. He walked toward the stage with a smile that now makes me sick to remember. "I'd like to make a special toast," he announced. I smiled nervously. Then the screens activated behind him. And my life shattered. The documents appeared one after another. Secret accounts. Tax fraud allegations. Corporate theft investigations. Every file connected to me. My father spoke like a grieving victim. I protected my daughter for years, he said. But integrity matters more than blood. The performance was flawless. People believed him instantly. Why wouldn't they? Arthur Sterling controlled newspapers, politicians, and half the city's elite donors. Who was I compared to him? Nobody. I tried to speak, but security was already moving toward me. Mark shouted that the documents were fake. Nobody listened. My father pointed directly at me. She stole from innocent people, he said coldly. And from this moment forward, she is no longer part of this family. My mother started crying softly. But she still never defended me. That hurt worse than anything. Because a part of me, even then, still hoped she loved me enough to stop him. She didn't. And when security dragged me outside into the storm, I realized the terrifying truth. I had never actually belonged to the Sterling family. I had only belonged to their image. The next few weeks nearly destroyed me. News channels replayed the wedding footage non-stop. Social media called me a criminal, a fraud, a spoiled billionaire daughter exposed for greed. My father froze every account connected to me. My trust fund vanished overnight. Even my apartment lease was cancelled through family connections. Mark and I moved into a tiny basement apartment on the outskirts of Cicero. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The walls smelled like mold. The radiator barely worked. I went from penthouses and chauffeurs to sleeping beside a bucket catching dirty water from the ceiling. At night, I cried quietly in the bathroom so Mark wouldn't hear me. But Mark never left. Not once. Even when strangers recognized me at the diner where I started working night shifts. Even when reporters waited outside. Even when my own family publicly blamed me for everything. He stayed. And slowly. The heartbreak inside me transformed into anger. Because the more I thought about the wedding, the more details started connecting in my mind. The hidden office safe. The encrypted files. The passwords my father forced me to memorize as a teenager for emergencies. At the time, I thought he trusted me. Now I realized the truth. He had been preparing me to clean up his crimes for years. So while the world thought I was broken, I started digging. Every night after work, I sat beside an old laptop in our basement apartment and searched through archived company files connected to Sterling Freight. For weeks, I found nothing useful. Then one night around 2 a.m., I discovered a hidden storage partition buried beneath old accounting software. And there it was. The real audit. Not tax fraud. Not embezzlement. Something far worse. Arthur Sterling had spent years siphoning retirement funds from elderly widows through fake investment subsidiaries hidden beneath Sterling Freight International. Millions of dollars stolen. Women left bankrupt. Life savings erased. Internal emails joked about victims dying before noticing missing funds. I felt physically sick reading it. But the worst discovery came minutes later. The offshore holding company connected to the stolen assets had been quietly transferred into my name over a year earlier. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then realization hit me like ice water. My father planned everything. When federal investigators eventually uncovered the fraud, the evidence would point directly at me. He intended to sacrifice his own daughter to save the Sterling empire. And suddenly, I stopped grieving him. Because fathers don't do that to their children. Monsters do. I could have gone straight to the FBI. But I didn't. Because I knew men like my father. Powerful men survive scandals all the time. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change stories. Politicians interfere. No. I needed something permanent. Something devastating. So I played the role my father expected. The broken daughter. The humiliated outcast. I stopped wearing makeup. Showed up publicly looking exhausted. Let gossip magazines photograph me leaving cheap grocery stores. I wanted Arthur Sterling to believe he had destroyed me completely. Because arrogant men become careless when they think they've already won. Then one afternoon, I walked directly into Sterling Freight headquarters. The receptionist looked horrified seeing me. Employees whispered as I crossed the marble lobby I once practically grew up in. My father agreed to see me immediately. Of course he did. He wanted to enjoy my humiliation in person. When I entered his office, he leaned back in his leather chair and smirked. "Well," he said slowly, "look what crawled back." I lowered my eyes. "I just want this to stop." He laughed softly. "You should have thought about that before embarrassing this family." Then he pulled out a $100 bill and tossed it onto the floor between us. "Take it," he said. "You'll need it when the federal charges arrive." For a moment, the room went silent. I bent down slowly. Picked up the money. Smiled. And looked directly into his eyes. "You're right," I said softly. "Those accounts are definitely a problem." His grin widened. Then I continued. "But they're not yours anymore." The smile disappeared instantly. I watched confusion flicker across his face. "What are you talking about?" "The Cayman Holdings," I replied calmly. "The shell corporation you transferred into my name last year to avoid litigation?" His face lost all color. 3 days earlier, I had legally transferred every connected asset into an irrevocable blind trust protected beyond his reach. Legally speaking, the empire he hid from investigators now belonged to me. And he couldn't touch a dollar. "No," he whispered. I stepped closer. "You framed the wrong daughter." For the first time in my life, Arthur Sterling looked afraid. And it was glorious. The federal raid happened 48 hours later. Agents stormed Sterling Freight headquarters before sunrise. Employees were escorted outside. Servers seized. Executives arrested. News helicopters circled overhead while reporters screamed questions through barricades. And in the middle of it all stood Arthur Sterling in handcuffs. The great billionaire king of Chicago looked old suddenly. Fragile. Human. I watched the live coverage from a quiet office overlooking the city skyline. The same city my father once controlled. Except now? The power belonged to me. But unlike him, I wasn't interested in empire. I returned every stolen dollar possible to the widows harmed by Sterling Freight's fraud. Some women cried on the phone when they learned their retirement money was being restored. One elderly woman told me she could finally afford cancer treatment again. That call broke me harder than the wedding ever did. Because it reminded me how many lives my father destroyed chasing status and control. So I made a decision. I used the remaining fortune to create the Sterling Foundation for Legal Justice, a nationwide legal aid organization helping women escape financial abuse, corporate exploitation, and family coercion. The same systems that once trapped me. I wanted to dismantle them. About a year later, I bought my childhood home in Lake Forest. Not because I loved it. Because I refused to let it remain my father's monument. The mansion felt colder than I remembered. Empty hallways. Echoing marble floors. Portraits of people pretending to be a perfect family. I walked slowly into my father's office one final time. The desk remained untouched. The whiskey decanter still sat beside the window. For a moment, I imagined the little girl I used to be standing there desperate for his approval. Then I opened every curtain in the room and let sunlight flood inside. Because darkness had protected Arthur Sterling for decades. And I was done living in it. I sold the mansion months later. But before leaving, I removed the massive oil portrait of my father hanging above the fireplace. I carried it outside personally. And watched it burn. Sometimes the people who destroy you are the same people who raised you. The same people who taught you obedience while secretly preparing to sacrifice you for their own survival. But betrayal does something dangerous to survivors. It teaches them how powerful they really are. My father thought humiliation would break me. Instead, it freed me. Because once you lose everything fear controls, you become impossible to control at all. So if someone ever tries to convince you that your voice doesn't matter, that your future belongs to them, that you're powerless without their approval, remember this. The people who underestimate you often hand you the tools that destroy them. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't ruining your enemies. It's building a life so powerful that their betrayal becomes the beginning of your success story. If this story moved you, subscribe to RevengeEcho for more emotional comeback stories, family betrayal dramas, and powerful revenge journeys. Turn on notifications and join the family, because the people who tried to bury you should never control the ending of your story.
Thanking you for watching RevengeEcho channel. Like, subscribe and comment where you are watching from.